Hello everyone, I am Tacit, and today I'm going to be going over the Gems of War event objectives for the In the Summertime event, in which the Sun Sprites is added to the game. So once again, similar to last week, we do have a little bit of a tamer week this week, mostly just having Guild War and such. However, we do have some pretty spicy weeks coming up with the summer events and the big ol' 7.0 right around the corner. That is pretty much the last week of one of the weeks where not as many things going on, but let's go over all those things. So, as far as the troop is concerned, we got ourselves a Sun Sprite. Unfortunately, unlike last week, where we got an absurdly good troop and a randomly good weapon, which we will be using for Guild War this week. However, this thing's not that good. It has 75% mana start, and if you saw this, it's like, oh, this has potential, potentially. 75% mana start, in theory, absurdly good. Unfortunately, almost everything that gets it, not that good of an ability. And this is under the standard buffing troop that will never get used category. There are a lot of them in the game. Why they keep adding them, I have no clue. They probably have usage rates on all of them, and all of them are nearly zero. But it just gives a bunch of life and magic to an ally, and if they are Fey, it doubles them. No extra turn potential, no anything like that. Just a little bit of a small buff that pretty much only applies to Fey as far as, getting double. And even in that situation, not really that good. I don't believe any Fey even has an HP boost ratio, and 6 magic's not really going to go that far compared to the many other mechanics in the game, even in early game, even in arena. I don't really see you using this as much of a mechanic, and overall, just going to remain useless, but you can stock up on red purple arcanes. Pretty good for the troop we have available this week as well, Queen Titania, so get her max if you don't already have her already. So there is at least that, if nothing else. With that being said, hey, tributes ready. Speaking of tributes, Bright Forest actually got to 24 star as of this new troop being added, which is nice because there's a little bit extra tribute chance, a little bit more gems per hour as per usual. Anyways, so one thing that's actually pretty relevant, which I normally don't show, but is pretty relevant this week, Bright Forest plus Fey have 10%, is almost the entirety of Bright Forest. And the reason I brought up Queen Titania, other than her being one of the stronger options from this place, is she does have 20% extra stats this week. She's one of the better Fairy Fire options in the entire game while having full AoE for a lot of damage. And this is a pretty potent combination that it has, being able to hit pretty high while also amplifying its damage as well as the rest of the team if you have other damage sources on it. So her having 20% is decently relevant, as it does make her a lot more viable this week. It also gives the Hierophant hero class 20%, which is noteworthy in that it has Cleanse, while having triple damage burning, so that's also a little bit more usable this week compared to normal. Anyways, as far as the event key drop table, it's a pretty skippable week, but there's a few things you want to make sure you have before the end of this week from here. So everything that you see here, except for the following, is in the drop table. That includes Emeraldin, which of course is only from the random Dragon Egg drop. The 4 troops from Sunken Fleets, which are only from throwing Chaos Shards at the Sunken Fleet faction. The Star, which is from the Vault drop table. And the Doom, the Doom of Nature, which is only when we have a green Doom event, whenever that next rolls around. However, there are a few things you do want to make sure you do not leave this week without from this kingdom. The first and most noteworthy one, if you are a brand new player, make sure to go get Leprechaun so much, because one big issue with early game is, you need a good mana accumulator, and there's some low rarity ones that can do that. But Leprechaun, it lasts the entire game. The second you get it, it just is always one of your best mana accumulators you're ever going to have. And the biggest issue with this is if you get super unlucky, you could go like a whole month of starting an account without getting Leprechaun. However, this week, he's pretty much free. You just throw several event keys, maybe at most a few dozen, onto the drop table, or and you should be able to get a Leprechaun. It shouldn't take that long. Could get lucky within like 5 keys, maybe even less. It's pretty common to get ultra rares, though of course it is competing with a few other ultra rares. But it is super easy to obtain this week. Never will be easier than right now. So good idea to make sure you have yourself a copy of it. If you really want to get more copies to get it max. However, there are 2 other things you probably want to make sure you have before the end of this week. This one you want to make sure before Guild War starts, Child of Summer. Really noteworthy on 2 Guild War days, as is Guild War this week. Brown and red Guild War Defend days are its 2 main things. Make sure to only use on one though, you cannot use on both. On Brown Day, you can deny Brown. And more noteworthy, it is probably used more often on Red Day, in synergy with Red Book, in order to not only feed it red mana, but to also give it red storm, which can ideally have an infinite loop, and then you just win. So that's the more common thing. Using it with like a double empower Red Book related Guild War Defend Red Day is its most common use. Though of course you can also use it offensively. Any kind of team that's really heavy on red, you can just feed them a bunch, including Queen Titania of course, though you can't do that in Guild War, but just generally speaking, because the color is green, yellow. But anything that needs red has really good synergy with. It's very similar to troop we got last week, actually. Except that last week was a green version, of course, whereas this one is a red one. It does not feed mana into itself. However, the combination is still very good and has a lot of synergies. And speaking of which, you do not want to leave this week without Queen Titania, ideally. She is particularly good this week with the 20% extra stats. She's one of the more noteworthy Fairy Fire options in the entire game, even better than most of the Mythics. We covered the Mythic tier list video the other week. However, and I mentioned like pretty much everything with Fairy Fire is at least like somewhat half decent, because there's not a particularly good Fairy Fire option in the game. Well, she is pretty much one of the best Fairy Fire options in the game. It's only one at a time. However, she makes up for it with how absurdly good her ability is. She hits every single enemy for some pretty good damage, 4 times boost ratio by red enemies and allies. So, of course, that includes herself, of course, because she is red. And on top of that, if there are 13 or more red gems on the board, she gains an extra turn. So if you have Red Storm and other things in play, that's very likely to have. And that basically means she can keep spamming extra turn full AoEs. We see how strong this is with Gem Dragons and other things that end up having it. While this isn't guaranteed, you can set up the board in a way and your storms in a way where you have a lot higher chance of this triggering. And when it does, you can just go for full AoE, full AoE. It's most commonly used with Yagwe, like Yagwe, Child of Summer, Queen Titania, one other option. But there's a lot of other ways you can end up building it. One thing that's pretty nice is she is used in some of the strongest non-mythic teams as well, which is worth considering, as, yeah, she's just overall really good. And 20% extra stats this week, so no reason not to, as she'll be better this week than ever before. Anyways, and that's pretty much it. The mythics are pretty bad here. Not a single one of these are worth having. Obviously, you need them eventually for kingdom upgrades, so you're really only opening them for kingdom upgrades. But yeah, I would say this week is open some amount of event keys if you don't have some of the better ones, like Queen Titania, Child of Summer, particularly Leprechaun if you just started the game recently. And aside from that, unless you're trying to upgrade this kingdom to 10-star, 20-star, anything like that, I probably wouldn't bother past those few troops, as the mythics just aren't really worthwhile, other than for completionist sake and kingdom upgrade sake. Anyways, next order of business, of course, as I mentioned, we have Guild Wars. I will be using, as I mentioned last week as well, the star weapon, or that wand, the 6-color wand we got last week. I will be using that on every single Guild War day offensively. We'll be doing that every single night on stream. But yeah, we'll have a lot of fun with that build of teams to see what we can end up doing. I want to see how good it is at countering Book. Of course, as far as your defend teams, make sure they're all unique. As long as it says you're getting 12,000 once it switches over, you know that you're getting the maximum amount of points. You just have to make sure every single one of these 24 troops are completely unique without repeating a single one. You can repeat hero classes, but you cannot repeat weapons, nor can you repeat troops. But you can repeat banners, you can repeat hero class itself, just not the hero class weapon. And yeah, just make sure they're all unique and as strong as possible, ideally, so that your guild can end up getting slightly more points, end up getting slightly more gems. Actually, which troop did we end up getting this week? Does it even say? Oh yeah, we're getting the Mizmer. Boo. No, actually, that one's kind of good. It's used for, you can kind of use it for some magic gain, as that place does give extra magic, so you can kind of use it in like a Kakarot build. But anyways, with the hero class. Anyways, the other thing that we have is the World Event. World Event's pretty straightforward, just rarity order, so that's nice. As far as the metal, we do have extra magic. So magic damage will apply to everything here. This does give us access to a couple pretty good things. Rowain, obviously insanely good. Just make sure it doesn't get hit. Just get your mana flowing very quickly. Aside from Rowain, we do have access to Queen Titania, Summers and all this mess, all the way down in queues. So obviously that's pretty strong. Leprechaun goes without saying. Pretty much almost every single team's going to have that. As we do have a couple good other empowers, but you're probably building around Leprechaun. However, there is a Siren route. The super early range, you can technically just Spirit Fox spam if you really wanted to. We do have Daughter of Ice too, which is kind of the same thing but for Blue Storm. Converts red to blue, then Blue Storm. But I personally feel like brown to red Storm will be a little bit more useful with the options that we have available. And of course, Leprechaun you can't really go wrong with. But Siren can still work too. Aside from that, any other good damage sources here? I believe it's most... we have Fairy Godmother, no. But, oh yeah, we do have Green Seer for mana accumulation too. I actually use it on this team here. But yeah, I would say that's pretty much the main damage sources. I guess you could go Rowain. But yeah, I mean, not Rowain, I mean, Mistralis. But Rowain and Queen Titania seem like your main core two. And you'd want to most likely build around one or the other. As there are a few options here and there, but none of them particularly over the top. Like Yasmin Green Loop you can technically do. But I don't feel like it's going to be worth it for how little damage it does for the most part, especially at the later range. It's just not going to be able to keep up properly. And of course, a lot of things from this kingdom, not that kingdom, from, where's Queen Titania? Because a lot of things from Bright Forest this week have 20%, because there's 10% to Fey and 10% to Bright Forest this week. So any of those you can kind of get a lot of value on this week as well, as we mentioned. Anyways, that's going to be the World Event. Pretty straightforward, just AoE spam until they're dead, with all the extra magic bonus. As far as the other things we have going on throughout the week, next week we'll have the summer events. I'm actually looking forward to that. The armor's pretty cool for it. But this Tuesday, we're going to be having the faction event for Sunken Fleets. Second fleet should be pretty straightforward. You just AoE spam it for the pure faction team, and you have a pretty good tank with Mirage Queen. Wednesday, we're getting the Shimmer Scale Pets egg thing. This has never been available from a guarantee event. However, it has had an event where you could get it for gems, I believe. I believe this was the gem locked one because it should be for the legendary. So this one was originally gem locked, but it has been in the drop table for months upon months now. So you probably, even if you didn't spend gems on you might already have a copy of this. However, if you don't have a copy of it yet, well, it's available on Wednesday, so make sure to do so. Thursday, we have the Hierophant class event. I mentioned this very briefly earlier, though let me elaborate a little bit more. Hierophant's actually kind of good, but almost never used. It does have 20% stats this week, so if there's any week to mess around with it, it's definitely this week. It's mostly known for one major gimmick, and that it has triple damage burning into cleanse on extra turn. It is the only hero class in the game that has this combination. There are other ways to get around this, of course, having mass cleanse on your team, even just Queen Beatrix or something similar. You can kind of do that. However, the main gimmick of Hierophant is that it can do it with one singular troop. Hero itself having cleanse, while also having triple damage burning, being able to allocate your weapon into anything you want without having to do a cleanse weapon. Just naturally has its cleanse on its own, so it's very situational. If the team has a lot of entangle freeze, it can kind of come into play. Though do keep in mind, if it does get stunned, it will no longer be able to do its cleanse. So if they're using something like Elementalist, it doesn't work against that, which is probably one of the main reasons Hierophant doesn't get used too often. As generally speaking, if you're getting hit by a bunch of those effects, you're also getting hit by stun off of Elementalists, and this does absolutely nothing against Elementalists, which is probably its biggest downside in the current state of the game. Elementalists just being absurdly good, as per usual. And this Friday, what's the event? We have ourselves a Dragon Invasion event, and we'll be getting a new Explodey Dragon weapon. I actually show the team with a different Explodey weapon, however, you could easily just replace it for the one we get this Friday, which I currently can't put in a team because, it doesn't exist until this Friday. But it's decent. It's, what you'd expect from Explodey weapon. There's a bunch of explodes, gives a bunch of stats effects to dragons, summons a random dragon. One thing that's pretty noteworthy about that is dragons do have a lot of high rarity options compared to the average thing. There are a very high concentration of legend, mythic, and in this case, these days, even a doom rarity or boss rarity, whatever you call them, red troops. So it has a very wide range of high rarity stuff that it could end up summoning. It could end up summoning any gem dragons, any of the many dragon mythics, any of the many dragon legends. It's probably one of the more concentrated rarities for higher rarity stuff. And yeah, you can summon all of them off that weapon we're getting this Friday from Invasion event. So that's pretty cool. As far as Soulforge, it has a mix. I would say the weapons are definitely better than the troops this week. As far as troops, plus a lot of people might be low on diamonds after going for Ironhawk last week. However, Possessed King, pretty explodey. I'm personally not a fan of it, however, it does have the highest amount of transforms of anything in the game, though inconsistent. And it does have a lot of explosions, which is good for some very skull spam teams. Personally not a big fan of it, however, it is pretty decent. Queen of Sin, no. What's the other one? There's one other semi-viable one that wasn't Possessed King. Where'd it go? Oh yeah, Wardbreaker. Oh yeah, also Wolf Garrick I wanted to explain. Wardbreaker, very situational, but it's a mana accumulator that does full AoE. Generally, there are things that can get better overall value. His mana cost is still a little bit too high for what he does, but he does have his niche, and he does get brought out occasionally. And Wolf Garrick, most noteworthy, has become from basically being one of the lesser mythics in the game to actually absurdly good due to one reason, and that is Todd. Todd has a green spam ability that's boosted by how many war gear are on the team. Wolf Garrick is a war gear, not only that, but he gives a magic gain to all other war gear, including himself. It is particularly relevant because Todd can spam infinite extra turns pretty much, or near infinite. It's not, it's a pseudo-infinite. Doesn't go forever, but it's pretty consistent, especially if a green storm in play. And this basically just gives you more damage every single time after you cast. So one issue that Todd always has in its infinite loop is similar to Truffle Infinite Loop, in that a lot of times it just doesn't do enough damage pressure compared to insta-kills and other similar things within the game, because it takes a little bit to get going, and then once it gets going, its damage output's not the greatest necessarily, but it's a lot of pretty much near infinite damage. However, Wolf Garrick just speeds this up a little bit. It gives it a bunch of magic every single time it lands an extra turn, which is pretty much every cast, and you just keep stacking more and more and more damage over time. And not only that, but you can also go and set up for double kills. One issue that Wolf Garrick has a ton is that it's very hard to get into exact kill range for it. However, Todd does that very well because you just keep poking them into extra turn. Then you can deliberately go for the Wolf Garrick to end your turn after you've taken all the extra turns from the board, get your double kill by killing the thing, the Devourer hits something else, hopefully they don't have immune or you have a way to curse it or something, and then you just double kill. It's definitely not the most consistent double kill, but it has definitely gotten a lot better since Todd was added several months ago. So it is worth considering him. And aside from that, yeah, that was everything here. So as far as weapons, there was two that are pretty good here. The most noteworthy one to mention definitely has to be Celestial Flask. So Celestial Flask, I personally don't use too often, but is absurdly good. It's the best potion option in the game. The main reason for not using it is it's pretty inconsistent. However, it is really fun to use. It creates 3 potion gems of any color other than brown. Why on earth does it not do brown? I have no clue. But every color except for brown it can end up doing. When it does all 3, it will do it all for the same color. So it'll choose one of these. So, you know, it'll do 3 blue or 3 green or 3 red, 3 yellow, 3 purple. It'll never do a mix. It just is 3 of a single one. And the most relevant thing here is gain an extra turn. Also has cleanse itself. But it gains an extra turn automatically. So this is absurdly good. Because that means you get to immediately use your own potions. This creates a bunch of gems onto the board of that color. And then you can kind of just keep getting a lot of mana accumulation that way. Keep in mind, of the gems that it does create, red and blue are 2 of its colors. So it has a 2 out of 5 chance that it will create the one that it actually utilizes. And even if it doesn't, you can just mana accumulate into something else onto your team. It's a very situational weapon, but is definitely by far the strongest potion option in the entire game as of currently. Aside from that, I almost thought Wand of Stars. No, Wand of Stars is permanently in Soulforge, by the way. I think I mentioned this last week. However, you can get this whenever. As long as you have the Lovers, which is in drop table. We have like 60-something copies of it or something. But it is in Volky drop table. And you can get this whenever. You can get this last week, this week, any week in the future. Just always available. And we'll be using that for Guild War this week. So, and it's a lot cheaper. It's, once you have this, it's only 100,000 souls instead of 1 million. Unlike things like Dawnbringer and the such, which end up costing, not that one, that was an exception as well. But Dustbringer, Dawnbringer, they cost 1 million. So only 100,000, pretty cheap for it once you have that. But anyways, that's always available. The other weapon I wanted to mention that isn't Celestial Flask is Trickster Shot. So Trickster Shot doesn't get used as often compared to Mang, Earth's Fury, stuff like that. However, it is basically the magic version of Mang. It eliminates all armor from an enemy and then deals some damage to them, and then gains +2 magic and then does a 3-to-1 based on all armor torn. So let's say they have 100 armor, you would end up gaining 33 magic. Technically 35 because you have the base 2, so you'd gain 35 magic in that situation. 33 from the boost ratio, and then an additional 2 just because it just always does +2. This is very situational. Generally, just scroll spamming into a Mang is way better, but there are some very niche instances where you would bring out Trickster Shot. I feel like in the current state of the game, it gets used less and less, especially as we have a lot more mana accumulators, a lot more damage sources just under troops that you can just mana accumulate 4 off your weapon. And there's just such a wide variety of weapons that it doesn't really get used that often, as almost every niche is already filled, and you just tend to get more value from Mang. But it is worth potentially considering as it is a unique mechanic, and its usage does come out maybe like 3 times per year. So maybe worth considering if you have a lot of spare resources and don't have it yet. But I would say Celestial Flask is by far the higher priority. If you're getting anything in Soulforge this week, I would say it is Celestial Flask if you were to get one and only one thing. But anyways, so with all that out of the way, let's go now over to a bunch of teams. Everything throughout the week, you can go and copy paste them from the description below if you want to go and utilize any of them. So let's start all the way from the World event. Obviously, Queen of Tanya spam. We're just going with a black mana, going to Archmages. Archmages to feed a little bit more into the purple. We went +2 just so we could feed directly into Queen of Tanya as well. Queen of Tanya, of course, 20% additional stats this week. Really nice amount of extra damage. It already hits like a powerhouse, and now it hits even harder. It's the boost ratio from all the reds on the team, which you have a few of. Has the extra turn whenever you have a lot of reds on the team. We didn't end up going down the Red Storm route. You could end up trying to put that in if you want. However, I figured it'd be slightly better damage if we just go a second Queen of Tanya due to enchant potions and everything like that. However, you can try putting in a Red Storm to utilize that a little bit better as well. And of course, with 2 of them on your team, you'll be able to get more Fairy Fires. If the entire enemy team is Fairy Fire, that's just straight up 50% more damage every time you cast. And you're already going to be hitting for some really high damage. And keep in mind, that does stack with the 160% medals that you have in the World event. So not only will you be getting 160% extra damage per every single one of those finished medals in the World event, but you'll also be able to stack all of that for 50% more. So let's say you're currently doing 320% more damage. That will basically be increased by 50% more. So that's not 370%. The way that the percents work is it takes all the percents that you have initially for your damage and then takes into account after the fact. So let's say you have 320% damage. Let's just say 300% damage for easy's sake. So let's say this damage is 70 because that's our boost ratio from herself. It's technically going to be higher, but let's just say it's going to do 70. That would bring it to 280 damage. However, that moves up by 50%. And that 50% is the totality of that. So that 300, what number did I just say? 70, 280. So that 280 will get increased by 140, bringing up to 420 math, somewhere around there. But that would bring it up by a whole additional 50% damage, which is not a small amount. But yeah, Fairy Fire, very strong, as it takes into account after all the other boosts that you have. So very, very, very strong, especially for something like a ward event where it gets even more bonus due to that spell damage. Anyways, so yeah, Fairy Fire, very strong. Aside from that, Rowan, also obviously very strong. Has the liability of if you take damage, obviously that's a bad thing. However, you know, just Rowan over and over again. Pretty much the whole premise, as would be any Rowan build. A little bit of a higher liability, but we have Black Manacle here for a backup if you truly need it. Has the AoE to damage pressure. Also has the Devour, so you can technically solo it just with your hero alone if you truly had to by the end. We're doing it with Elementalist to be able to tank up a little bit more as well. Next, we're moving on to the faction. Faction is our red-blue restriction for Sunken Fleet. As far as the first day we have here, and of course you're allowed to use any color weapon for this event. So the first one that we have here is red-blue. For red-blue, once again, we're basically just all in on a rolling build. Quick kill down, click cast, auto win. We don't have as good of a mana accumulator this time around, but it does still feed green to Rowan, so you have that as an option. For the higher range, we basically just have a pretty standard, like, Bane of Mercy, High King Iron Gut Zolgoth team. We're doing it with Marilith for the mana accumulator. Unfortunately, we don't have access to Thrall. Thrall would be a little bit better here because of Bane of Mercy. However, we do not have access to purple due to red-blue. So next best bet is just put triple red into Marilith, double off a banner, one from herself, and just rush her up, get your mana accumulation that way, and be good to go. And of course, you're also getting a ton of mana accumulation in the purple from Bane of Mercy, which also gives you 4 times Curse for High King Iron Gut, which also gives you pretty much guaranteed max attack for High King Iron Gut, even if you don't already have it, in order to be able to go get this 100% Devours, or at least make it a lot more consistent. As far as Pure Factions are concerned, there's a couple different ways you could build this, but basically you want to have a Mirage Queen to tank, and then follow it by a billion Water Elementals. You need to have at least one Mirage Queen, not only for tank, but it gives you 50% mana start to all Elementals. Of course, Water Elemental is indeed an Elemental, and his whole premise is that he hits all enemies simultaneously. He also has stun, but you're primarily using it for its full AoE. One thing that's pretty nice about this too is as long as he's not stunned yet, he does have the extra blue mana, because of course the enemy also has the ability to stun you. Even though you can stun the enemy, they can also stun you, and stunning them does not prevent them from stunning you, as it's on the ability, not off their trait. So as soon as they cast their Water Elemental, you will be stunned. However, prior to then, you will have +3 blue mana if using 3 of these. You have +1 for each, and combined with the banner, we'll have 4, or up to 5 if you want to go down the double banner route. I went double brown just because you're already going to have a decent amount of blue, just to kind of mix it up. Also because you're initially going to be blocked on Mirage Queen mana. You actually do not want to cast Mirage Queen unless you have really good alignment and you just want to click it, because you're going to get so much mana accumulation, like 2 different 5 times on the board or something similar. You can go for it in that situation, but for the most part, you actually don't want to end up casting out Mirage Queen. You do have Curse and stuff, so I guess you can get rid of Submerge, so that's very uncommon, but could happen if you get that one Legendary room or something when you're going through. But for the most part, you want to ignore Mirage Queen even exists here, and just keep spamming Water Elemental until you win. Just keep slowly chipping them down, and just chip them down quicker than they chip you down, essentially. Next, we have the Hierophant class event. Oh, I just realized something! I think this is the same team I showed for the Ward event, which makes sense, because Queen Titania has 20% bonus this week, and the restriction for the Ward event is Fey, but the restriction for the Thursday class event is Fey from Bright Forest. So, yeah, they are both from Bright Forest. Oh, that's funny. I didn't even intend to do that. But, yeah, it's the same team as the other one. Well, I guess you could use it for both. Perfect. There we go. Anyways, as far as the trials, they did end up tweaking it. I believe by default it shows it like this. And honestly, this is a perfectly fine way to do it. Summer Knights, Queen Titania, Leprechaun, and Florian. The reason I have Florian in first slot in the setup is mostly because you want to basically meat wall it. You don't really need its Green Storm. If anything, the Green Storm will actually hinder you. You don't really need its Mana Drain. Well, its Mana Drain could be good, but you don't need green mana. It's going to be creating a bunch of green mana, and the only thing that uses that is Leprechaun, and Leprechaun doesn't really care if it has a lot of mana. It can pretty much provide all its mana for itself for the most part. Not all of it, but, you know, a good majority of it. So you basically want to kill out your Florian to make your team stronger. Use it as a meat shield at the higher range, and this gives you enough time for Summer Knight to bulk up. Summer Knight is basically going to be unkillable by the time your Florian dies. It has 40% score reduction. It has some board control. Ends up gaining a bunch of armor, as well as a little bit of attack. And you end up also getting barrier. So this thing is going to be near unkillable by the time Florian dies, as you're already going to have barrier. You're going to be buffed at least once, if not multiple times, and you still have your really high score reduction, even if they do get skull pokes down on you. Queen Titania, we've already explained many times, but she will be your primary damage source. In this current setup, she does have a little bit of a mana issue initially, so if you want to do the earlier range, you probably do want to do it a little bit more like this. Honestly, super early range. You probably almost want to go Queen Titania up front and have Leprechaun right behind it, and basically just do like something like this for the super early range. But you do eventually want to switch it back once you get a little bit deeper as they're going to be hitting you way harder. But for super, super early range, like if you haven't even reached the star battles yet, Queen Titania, you're just going to want to like insta-wipe with that over and over again with how much damage she has this week, as well as just in general. But yeah, let the Florian die. Summer Knight becomes super tanky. Queen Titania does all your damage, and Leprechaun does standard Leprechaun stuff where it mass mana accumulates. And yeah, you just have the medium power to do it immediately. Aside from that, we do have an Invasion event this weekend. It's the main weekend event we have going on. As far as the Evasion event is concerned, it is restricted specifically to dragons, though you're allowed to use any hero class as well as any hero weapon. We are getting access to a new Dragon Explodey weapon on this Friday, so you can replace out this with that. You can also do Obsidian Librum, you can do Oshia's Tome, and pretty much any mass mana accumulator would work pretty well here. Or you can just replace it with the new one we're getting this Friday. And the whole premise is we're double spamming up on the Invasion tower killing troop. It just has 5 times damage to towers, as well as being able to do 5 times damage on its ability while doing some mana accumulation. It's a really great way to just quickly deal with the towers, as is pretty much every event. Just kind of just spam them until you win. And we have Divinia. Divinia, if you really get a little bit low, will give you a little bit extra HP. Has Cleanse, though there's generally not much to cleanse in tower events, but, you know, there are a few things like Stun and such, which Stun does get rid of your 5 times extra damage on Skull, so there's that. And aside from that, does get to do the random stats effects as well, so you'll be able to get Barrier, Bless, all those kind of things. So you have a little bit extra stats effect. But basically, you're just mass mana accumulating into double Themiris, however you call his name. And it's pretty much the whole premise of this Friday Invasion. That'll be lasting all weekend. Anyways, guys, that'll wrap it up for now. If you still have any other questions, feel free to leave in the comment section below. I hope you all have a wonderful, wonderful week. And I will catch all of you guys later. Goodbye, everyone. And thanks for watching.